"You actually came," one executive laughed when the curvy secretary entered. Another whispered, "Lucan only invited her as a joke." Imogen heard him. So did the devastatingly handsome mafia boss waiting at the table. She calmly removed her coat, revealing a fitted black dress that made every conversation stop. Lucan stared. Imogen walked straight to him, placed his forgotten contract in front of his plate, and smiled. "Relax, Mr. Serrano. I know why you invited me." His expression changed. "Then why are you here?" She leaned closer. "To see who ends up embarrassed." Lucan Serrano had watched men discover they were about to lose fortunes with more composure than he managed in that moment. Imogen knew. Worse, she had known before she walked through the door. Across the private dining room, Marcel Dane lowered his wineglass with suspicious care. The executive who had laughed suddenly became fascinated by his napkin. Lucan pulled out the chair beside him. "Sit." Imogen raised one eyebrow. "Please," he added. That earned him the faintest smile. Dinner resumed, although not comfortably. Imogen behaved as if nothing unusual had happened. She discussed the upcoming Rotterdam acquisition, corrected a scheduling conflict for Monday, and politely answered Marcel when he asked about a mystery novel she had recommended. Lucan barely touched his food. The black dress had shocked him. Yes. It followed the generous curves her office clothes usually treated as irrelevant information. Her dark hair, normally pinned into practical submission, fell softly around her face. But the longer he watched her, the more irritating his initial reaction became. Nothing fundamental about Imogen had changed. The dry humor was familiar. So was the calm intelligence. Even the expression she gave people when they said something foolish was one Lucan had seen hundreds of times over the rims of her large glasses. He simply had never examined why he enjoyed provoking it. Then Graham Voss, one of Serrano Global's younger executives, began explaining the financing structure for the Rotterdam deal. Imogen stopped eating. Lucan noticed immediately. "What?" Graham glanced at him. "Excuse me?" "I wasn't asking you." Every eye shifted toward Imogen. She set down her fork. "The currency exposure is wrong." Graham stiffened. "No, it isn't. The Dutch projections were revised Thursday. You're using Wednesday's conversion assumptions." "I reviewed those numbers myself." "Yes," Imogen said pleasantly. "That's what concerns me." Marcel coughed into his fist. Graham flushed. "Miss Reed, this is hardly—" "Show me." Lucan's voice ended the argument. A tablet appeared. Figures were opened. Imogen leaned toward the screen, found the relevant line, and pointed. Silence followed. The mistake was small on the page. Across the transaction, it was worth several $1,000,000. Lucan looked at Graham. "Fix it before morning." Then he looked at Imogen. "Good catch." She returned to dinner. "That's what you pay me for." The words should have been ordinary. Tonight they weren't. Lucan began remembering all the moments he had treated as ordinary. Contracts appearing on his desk before he realized he needed them. Impossible meetings rearranged without complaint. Discrepancies caught before they became disasters. He had considered himself exceptionally observant. Apparently, only when he had decided someone was worth observing. By dessert, the executives who had participated in yesterday's joke had become remarkably quiet. Imogen spared them the humiliation of mentioning it. That somehow made Lucan feel worse. When the others finally began leaving, he caught her near the door. "Imogen!" She turned. "You could have refused the invitation." "I could have. Why didn't you?" Her expression remained composed. "Because then you would have learned nothing." Lucan stepped closer. He was accustomed to people retreating when he did that. Imogen didn't move. "And what exactly did I learn?" "That I'm not desperate for your attention." His jaw tightened. She adjusted the contract beneath her arm. "And perhaps something else." "What?" "That laughing at someone is much easier when you've decided they don't know you're doing it." For once, Lucan had no defense disguised as wit. Imogen gave him a professional smile. "Good night, Mr. Serrano." She walked away without looking back. Marcel appeared beside Lucan several seconds later. "You invited her as a joke." Lucan's gaze remained fixed on the empty doorway. "Stop saying that." "Why? Is the joke less funny now?" Lucan turned his head slowly. "Marcel." "I'm stopping." He wasn't. Monday morning, Imogen Reed arrived at Serrano Global wearing a cream cardigan, sensible navy skirt, large glasses, and the expression of a woman whose weekend had contained absolutely no mafia bosses staring at her over candlelight. Lucan found this inexplicably irritating. At 9:12, she entered his office with his schedule. Zurich moved to 11. Legal needs 15 minutes before the Valenti call. "Your security briefing is at 3, and I cancelled dinner with Senator Bell's committee because accepting it would put you in the same room as 2 people currently being investigated for bribery." Lucan stared at her. Imogen glanced down at herself. "Is something wrong?" "No." "Excellent." She placed a folder on his desk. "You're staring." Lucan looked at the folder. "I'm thinking. That must be it." She left. From the sofa, Marcel lowered his newspaper. "You expected the dress again?" "No." "Of course not." "Marcel, the teasing would have been easier to dismiss if the office hadn't changed after Friday." People whispered. Some had discovered Imogen was beautiful and suddenly behaved as though this were breaking corporate news. Others speculated about what had happened between her and Lucan. Imogen ignored all of it. She didn't dress differently. She didn't flirt. She didn't exploit the attention. Instead, she continued doing what she had apparently been doing for years, quietly preventing highly paid people from making expensive mistakes. Lucan started noticing. At 10:30, she intercepted a contract because an indemnity clause had been altered after legal approval. At noon, she rearranged a negotiation after discovering the opposing chairman's flight had been delayed before his own staff informed him. At 2, Lucan heard her speaking softly to a junior assistant whose mother was in the hospital. "Go," Imogen said. "I'll cover your afternoon." "I can't. Mr. Serrano has—" "Mr. Serrano will survive." Lucan, passing behind them, stopped. Imogen looked at him. He considered objecting. "Go," he told the assistant. After she hurried away, Lucan asked, "How did you know?" "She has rescheduled the same medical appointment 3 times. "You remember everyone's appointments?" "No, I remember patterns." That answer followed him into his next meeting. Lucan had built an empire by recognizing patterns. Shipping routes, political loyalties, weak competitors, men likely to betray him. Yet somehow, he had categorized Imogen years ago and stopped looking. Secretary, efficient, bookish, safe, professor. The nickname bothered him now. That afternoon, he heard 2 executives use it near the elevators. Professor Reed saved Graham's ass again. Lucan stopped walking. Both men straightened. "If you mean Miss Reed," he said, "use her name." Neither argued. Imogen, standing 10 feet away with a stack of reports, had heard him. She waited until the men disappeared. "You don't need to police nicknames for me. I should have stopped it before." "Yes. No gratitude, no reassurance, just agreement." It landed harder than accusation. That evening, most of the executive floor emptied, while Lucan remained behind reviewing acquisition documents. At 7:40, he stepped outside and found Imogen still at her desk, glasses slightly lower on her nose, reading 2 spreadsheets simultaneously. "Why are you still here?" She didn't look up. "Because tomorrow you intend to negotiate a 9-figure logistics agreement using projections that assume a port expansion will finish on schedule." "It won't? It has missed every deadline for 14 months. Lucan took the report she offered. She had marked 3 pages. He read them. Again, she was right. How long have you been doing this? Imogen finally looked at him. My job? No, seeing things everyone else misses. A small smile touched her mouth, long enough to recognize the difference between being invisible and being underestimated. Lucan went silent. Friday's dress had forced him to look. Monday taught him the more uncomfortable truth. He hadn't discovered a beautiful woman hiding beneath cardigans. He had discovered that the woman quietly holding his world together had been standing directly in front of him all along. And Lucan Serrano, who prided himself on seeing everything, had somehow been the last man in the building to notice. Lucan Serrano had negotiated with ministers, criminals, billionaires, and men who believed murder was a reasonable business strategy. None of them had prepared him for buying coffee. He stood outside Imogen's office Tuesday morning, holding a cup he had personally ordered. She looked from it to him. What is this? Coffee. I recognized the species. Lucan placed it on her desk. For you. Suspicion replaced surprise. Imogen took a cautious sip. Then she looked at him. You don't like it. It is very thoughtful. You hate it. I didn't say that. What do you normally drink? She hesitated. Marcel appeared at precisely the wrong moment. Imogen handed him the cup. Congratulations. Marcel tasted it. Hazelnut? Lucan's expression darkened. Apparently, the following morning, a flat white with cinnamon and no sugar appeared beside Imogen's keyboard. She tasted it. Lucan waited. Her eyes lifted over her glasses. You asked someone. I investigated. My coffee? I dislike repeating mistakes. Something softened briefly in her expression. Thank you. It was absurd how satisfying 2 words could be. Unfortunately, coffee did not produce the result Lucan wanted. At noon, he stopped beside her desk. Have lunch with me. I already have plans. Tomorrow. Busy. Thursday. Also busy. Lucan narrowed his eyes. You cannot possibly have lunch scheduled for every day this week. Imogen opened her calendar. I can show you. He stared at her. She stared back. Lucan had spent most of his adult life surrounded by people who reorganized entire days when he expressed a preference. Imogen Reed wouldn't reorganize a sandwich. By Friday, his attempts became less subtle. He sent her a first edition of a detective novel she'd once mentioned. She returned it. He reserved a table at a restaurant with a 6-month waiting list. She declined. He finally appeared beside her desk after everyone else had left. Are you punishing me? Imogen removed her glasses. No. It feels remarkably similar. I'm letting you experience a woman not rearranging her life because you asked. Lucan folded his arms. I apologized. No, you've been attentive. There is a difference? A considerable one. She leaned back. You're accustomed to solving problems by applying enough pressure, money, or competence. But I'm not a negotiation. Lucan's amusement disappeared. Imogen continued more quietly. If you want me to believe Friday changed something, don't buy me things. Don't suddenly decide I'm interesting because I wore a black dress. That isn't why. Then prove it. How? That's the inconvenient part, Mr. Serrano. You have to figure it out. She returned her glasses to her face and resumed typing. Lucan remained there. Was the coffee at least correct? Imogen's mouth twitched. Yes. He nodded once, accepting the smallest victory available. When he entered his office, Marcel was waiting. How goes the courtship? There is no courtship. Ah, so the first edition, restaurant reservation, and caffeine surveillance are part of an internal efficiency program. Lucan poured himself a drink. She thinks I'm trying to impress her. You are. Lucan shot him a look. Marcel shrugged. Your problem is that you're trying to impress her like Lucan Serrano. I am Lucan Serrano. Exactly. Lucan paused. For once, the joke contained something useful. The next morning, there were no flowers, gifts, or impossible reservations. Instead, Lucan called Imogen into his office and handed her a chair. "I want your assessment of the Marseille expansion." She blinked. "Finance already submitted one." "I didn't ask what finance thinks." He opened the report. "I asked what you think." For the next 40 minutes, he listened. Actually listened. He challenged her assumptions, and she challenged his. She identified operational weaknesses 3 departments had missed. When they finished, Lucan closed the folder. "You should be in these strategy meetings." Imogen studied him, searching for flattery. She found none. "Is that another attempt to get me to dinner?" "No." A beat passed. "Good." She stood. At the door, she glanced back. "I'm free Wednesday." Lucan went completely still. "For lunch," she clarified. Then she left. Marcel, who had somehow materialized in the adjoining doorway, smiled. Lucan pointed at him. Not one word. Marcel raised both hands. For almost 3 seconds he obeyed. Andrew Larkin arrived Wednesday morning, carrying a laptop, 3 encrypted drives, and absolutely no fear of Lucan Serrano. Lucan disliked him almost immediately. There was no defensible reason for this. Andrew was the cybersecurity consultant hired to audit Serrano Global's infrastructure after several suspicious access attempts. He was competent, discreet, and irritatingly polite. The problem began when Imogen noticed the book beneath his laptop. "Dorothy Sayers?" Andrew looked delighted. "You know her?" "I have standards." 10 minutes later, they were debating mystery novels beside Imogen's desk. Lucan watched through the glass wall of his office. Marcel followed his gaze. "No." Lucan looked at him. "No what?" "Whatever you're thinking. I'm watching my employees. Andrew isn't your employee. That makes it worse." At lunch, Imogen kept the promise she had made Lucan. They ate together. Lucan discovered she preferred old bookstores to luxury boutiques, hated inspirational business books, and had once been banned from a university trivia competition because her team won 4 years consecutively. He also discovered she could make him laugh. Not politely, actually laugh. For 45 minutes, Lucan forgot that half the city feared his name. Then, they returned to the office, and Andrew handed Imogen a crossword clue he'd been unable to solve. She solved it in 8 seconds. Andrew grinned. "You're terrifying." "So I've been told." "You're having lunch with me tomorrow." Imogen smiled. "Is that a question?" "It became one when you looked at me like that." Lucan stopped walking. Thursday at 12:14, Andrew and Imogen left together. At 12:31, Lucan called her. She returned at 12:40. "You needed me?" Lucan handed her a document. Imogen read it. "This requires my signature?" "Yes." "No, it doesn't." Lucan glanced at the page. She was correct. "Anything else?" "No." She left. At 1:17, he called her again, this time regarding a calendar conflict. At 1:43, again. Imogen entered, carrying her notebook. "What now?" Lucan considered the question. Before he could invent an answer, Marcel spoke from the sofa. "You know she's your secretary, not a hostage." Lucan's eyes hardened. "I know." "Then stop summoning her every 6 minutes." "It's been 12. Marcel stared at him. "That's somehow worse." Imogen pressed her lips together. Lucan noticed. "Are you laughing?" "No." "You are." "Would it help if I apologized?" "No." "Then I'm not." She turned toward the door. Lucan heard himself ask, "Did Larkin make you laugh at lunch?" Imogen slowly looked back. There was enough silence for Lucan to recognize his mistake. Marcel became intensely interested in his phone. "Yes," Imogen said. Lucan waited. Nothing followed. "About what?" "A joke." "What joke?" "One that was funny." Marcel's shoulders shook. Lucan ignored him. The situation deteriorated during Friday's security meeting. Andrew sat opposite Imogen. Halfway through a grim presentation about network vulnerabilities, he slid a note across the table. Imogen read it. She laughed softly. Lucan stopped speaking. Is something funny? Every executive froze. Imogen looked up. Yes. Would you like to share? Not particularly. Marcel lowered his head. Andrew, to his credit, looked only mildly alarmed. Lucan continued the meeting with the expression of a man considering hostile acquisition as a personality trait. Afterward, Marcel followed him into his office. You cannot threaten a cybersecurity consultant because he understands crossword puzzles. I haven't threatened anyone. Your face has. Lucan loosened his tie. He's interested in her. Yes. The immediate answer annoyed him more. And she's interested in him. Marcel studied his oldest friend. You could ask her. Lucan gave him a flat look. That would require admitting you care, Marcel added. Silence. There it was. Lucan could command hundreds of men across a sophisticated criminal empire. He could make competitors abandon deals with a phone call, and politicians reconsider loyalties before breakfast. But Imogen had done something far more dangerous. She had given him no control at all. Andrew was free to make her laugh. Imogen was free to enjoy it. And Lucan was discovering that jealousy became remarkably uncomfortable when there was no enemy to punish. Sabine Hawthorne had spent years believing she understood the hierarchy of Serrano Global. Power sat at the top. Beauty stood comfortably beside it. And women like Imogen Reed organized the calendar. The executive reception on Friday evening disturbed that arrangement. Imogen had attended because Lucan required senior operational staff present. She wore a dark emerald dress beneath a tailored jacket, her glasses still firmly in place. She looked like herself. That seemed to bother Sabine more than any transformation could have. Lucan was speaking with investors when he noticed Sabine approach Imogen near the bar. He couldn't hear them yet. He saw Imogen's posture change. That was enough. Sabine smiled. You've become adventurous lately. With what? Your wardrobe. Imogen glanced at her dress. It has sleeves, Sabine. Try to recover. Sabine's smile tightened. I simply admire your confidence. Some women with your figure would be more cautious. Imogen became very still. Lucan started toward them. Marcel caught his arm. Wait. Lucan looked at him with enough menace to empty rooms. She doesn't need rescuing, Marcel said quietly. Lucan hated that Marcel was right. Across the room, Sabine continued. Of course, confidence can be useful when someone is trying to attract a particular kind of attention. Whose? Sabine glanced toward Lucan. The implication was obvious. Imogen followed her gaze and understood. Then she smiled. You think I changed how I dress to seduce my boss? I didn't say that. No, you wanted me to say it for you. Several nearby conversations had gone quiet. Sabine lowered her voice. You should be careful, Imogen. Attention from powerful men can make people overestimate their position. Imogen's expression remained almost pleasant. Interesting. What is? You keep discussing my body because discussing my work would require admitting I'm better at mine than you are at yours. Sabine's face emptied. Imogen took a sip of champagne. And if my existence in a fitted dress creates a strategic crisis for you, perhaps strategic relations needs new leadership. Marcel looked at Lucan. Lucan almost smiled. Almost. Sabine noticed him then. Her confidence faltered. Lucan, we were only talking. I heard. 2 words. Nothing more. For the rest of the reception, he said nothing about it. That surprised Imogen. It also disappointed a small part of her she refused to examine. But the following Monday, Sabine received notice of a formal review. Not for insulting Imogen, for a pattern. Lucan had ordered human resources and outside counsel to examine complaints involving Sabine's treatment of assistants, junior analysts, and support staff. There were 11. Imogen entered his office carrying the review summary. "You did this because of Friday. Friday made me ask whether it was an isolated incident. And it wasn't." She studied him. "You could have fired her." "Yes. Why didn't you?" "Because then everyone would assume I punished her for insulting a woman I'm pursuing." Imogen blinked. Lucan continued before she could address that particular phrase. "If she abused her authority, the evidence should establish it, not my temper." That answer mattered. More than flowers would have, more than reservations, more perhaps than Lucan understood. Imogen sat opposite him. The professor nickname wasn't the only thing. His expression changed. She told him about executives who assumed she was administrative furniture until they needed something fixed, about comments disguised as compliments, about people who treated a plus-size woman as either invisible or comedic until she dressed in a way they considered attractive. Lucan listened without interrupting. Finally he said, "And I allowed part of it." "Yes." No softening. Again. Lucan nodded. "I won't anymore." Imogen held his gaze. "Don't change it for me." "Then for whom?" "For the next woman who works here and doesn't have direct access to the chairman." That landed exactly where she intended. Lucan leaned back slowly. He had spent years believing power meant protecting what belonged to him. Imogen was forcing him to consider a harder definition. Power also meant responsibility for what happened beneath his authority when he wasn't looking. The following week, Sabine remained employed while the investigation continued. New reporting procedures were introduced across the executive division, and complaints could bypass direct supervisors. Lucan never publicly connected any of it to Imogen. That was precisely why she noticed. Later, Marcel found Lucan watching her through the office glass again. "This is getting serious." Lucan didn't deny it. Across the floor, Imogen laughed at something an assistant said, cardigan buttoned over her dress, glasses slipping down her nose. Lucan watched her push them back into place. The black dress had caught his attention. But this woman, the difficult, brilliant, uncompromising woman who demanded he become better without ever asking to possess him, she was the one keeping it. Imogen discovered Lucan Serrano was mafia because someone tried to breach a Serrano global security server at 2:17 on a Thursday morning. By 7, the executive floor had transformed. Men Imogen had never seen occupied every entrance. They wore expensive suits, concealed weapons badly enough that she noticed, and spoke into encrypted radios using terminology that had nothing to do with corporate security. Andrew had been called in before dawn. Lucan had not left his office. At 8:15, Imogen entered with the incident reports and found Marcel standing beside 2 unfamiliar men. One said, "The Eastern crews are waiting for your authorization, boss." Silence. The man saw Imogen. Marcel closed his eyes briefly. Lucan's expression became unreadable. Imogen placed the reports on his desk. "Boss?" Nobody answered. She looked at Marcel. He suddenly found the ceiling fascinating. Then at Lucan. "Everybody out," Lucan said. The room emptied. Imogen remained. "How large?" Lucan leaned against his desk. "Imogen, how large?" He knew immediately what she meant. Large. That is not a measurement. No. Shipping? Yes. Security? Yes. Construction? Yes. Property? Yes. Property? Yes. She stared at him. The unexplained meetings, the private terminals, the men who call Marcel before they call your legal department. Lucan said nothing. "Oh my God." Imogen took off her glasses. "You're mafia." "Yes. Not allegedly. Not connected. Yes." She laughed once, without humor. And you thought this wasn't relevant information. There are things I couldn't tell you. You could have told me something. You never asked. Her eyes widened. That's your defense. Lucan paused. It's not a very good one. No, Lucan. It is spectacularly bad. It was the first time she had used his first name while angry. Under different circumstances, he might have enjoyed it. She paced once across the office. How much of Serrano Global is real? All of it. And the rest? Lucan chose his words carefully. Serrano Global is legitimate. It also gives me access, infrastructure, and influence. Outside it, I control organizations operating across ports, private networks, protection systems, underground finance, and territories that don't appear on corporate reports. Imogen went quiet. For the first time since he'd known her, Lucan saw fear reach her face. Not theatrical fear. Calculation. You kill people. Lucan didn't insult her with an easy lie. I have ordered things you would not accept. The honesty hurt more. Imogen looked toward the windows. So every time I stayed late, you were protected. I didn't ask whether I was protected. Lucan stopped. She faced him. I was deciding whether I was safe. That distinction struck him harder than anger. You were never a target because of me. Until I am. Lucan couldn't promise otherwise. Imogen saw the answer in his silence. She picked up her glasses but didn't put them on. What exactly did you think would happen if this became serious between us? I didn't know if it would. And now? Lucan crossed the distance between them, then deliberately stopped several feet away. Now I know I should have told you before asking you for anything more. Imogen's eyes burned with anger, and something worse. Hurt. That was what finally stripped the argument from him. He could order men across half the city to move before sunrise. He could shut down routes, freeze money, erase threats. He could not command her to forgive him. If you want to resign, he said, you can. She stared at him. No retaliation, no interference with your career, no surveillance disguised as protection unless there's an immediate threat connected to me. You'd let me walk away? The question was quiet. Lucan's jaw tightened. I don't want you to. That wasn't my question. Yes. The answer cost him. Perhaps that was why she believed it. Imogen put her glasses back on. I need time. You have it. She reached the door, then stopped. Lucan? Yes? The frightening part isn't that you're dangerous. He waited. Her hand tightened around the handle. It's that knowing what you are doesn't make this as easy as it should. She left. Lucan remained motionless. Marcel entered several seconds later. How bad? Lucan looked toward the closed door. She knows. Marcel winced. And? She hasn't decided whether she's leaving. For the first time in years, the most feared man in the city could do nothing but wait for someone else's choice. And that frightened him more than any enemy ever had. Imogen took 6 days to decide whether to leave Serrano Global. Lucan did not ask once. That was how she knew the choice he had given her was real. He kept their conversations professional. He stopped finding reasons to appear at her desk. Even the coffee disappeared. Strangely, she missed it. On the 7th morning, Andrew Larkin closed the door to the conference room and placed an offer letter in front of her. My firm needs a director of operations. Imogen stared at the title. This is a substantial promotion. You've been doing executive-level work without the title for years. She looked at him. Andrew smiled. And before you ask, no, this isn't an elaborate attempt to get a date. Good. The date invitation would be separate. Imogen laughed. Unfortunately, Lucan walked past the glass wall at exactly that moment. He saw Andrew. He saw the letter. He saw Imogen laughing. Marcel, beside him, murmured, "Keep walking." Lucan kept walking. Barely. That afternoon, Imogen entered his office and placed the offer on his desk. Lucan read it. His expression revealed nothing. You should consider it. I am. The answer hurt more than he expected. Director is closer to the work you should be doing. Yes. Compensation is fair. Yes. Lucan set the letter down. Every instinct that had built his empire told him to eliminate the problem. Buy Andrew's firm. Double Imogen's salary. Create a title. Make leaving irrational. Instead, he asked, "What do you want?" Imogen studied him. "I want to know whether staying here means always being your secretary first and the woman you're interested in second." "No," you answered quickly. "Because I've had 6 days to understand how badly I've handled both." She folded her arms. Lucan rose. "The night I invited you to dinner, I thought I was doing something amusing. You were." "I was arrogant. Yes, and wrong." Imogen's face remained guarded. "About what?" "About you wanting my attention." He stepped closer, stopping before the distance became pressure. "It turns out I was the one trying to earn yours." Something shifted behind her eyes. Lucan continued. "I noticed the dress first. I'd like to pretend otherwise, but that would be another lie." Imogen said nothing. "But the dress isn't why I learned your coffee order. It isn't why I want your opinion before I trust a room full of executives. It isn't why I know you push your glasses up when you're about to tell me I'm wrong." Her mouth almost moved. "It isn't why I hate Larkin. He's very nice. I know, it's intolerable." A laugh escaped her. Lucan smiled briefly, then became serious again. "I fell for the woman who returned my gifts, corrected my contracts, challenged how I run my company, and made me understand that having power over people is not the same as deserving their respect." Imogen's humor faded. "And the mafia? Still real. The danger? Also real. You cannot promise me a normal life." "No. Can you promise honesty?" Lucan hesitated. "Not about every operation, but about anything that affects your safety, your choices, or us." "Yes." Imogen looked at the offer letter. "If I stay, I won't stay because we're together. I know. I won't accept a promotion you manufacture because you want me nearby. Then we establish an independent review, outside assessors, documented performance criteria. Marcel recuses himself. So do I. And if they decide I'm not qualified, you don't get the position." She searched his face. "And if I take Andrew's offer?" Lucan's jaw flexed. "I will hate it. Lucan, but I won't stop you." There it was again. Choice. The one thing a man accustomed to controlling outcomes had finally learned to give her. Imogen moved closer. "Andrew also asked me on a date." Lucan went very still. She waited. His expression passed through jealousy, irritation, and disciplined suffering. "And I declined." Air returned to his lungs. "Why?" "Because I'm interested in someone else." Lucan's gaze dropped to her mouth before returning to her eyes. "Someone deserving?" "The evidence is mixed." He almost laughed. Imogen touched his tie, straightening something that wasn't crooked. "You don't get forgiven because you fell in love with me." "I know." "You don't get to turn me into something you own." "I know." "And if you ever invite me somewhere as a joke again." "I know." She smiled. "You're learning. Painfully." Imogen kissed him. It was brief, deliberate, and entirely on her terms. When she stepped away, Lucan Serrano, the man who could silence a room by entering it, looked momentarily incapable of speech. Marcel opened the office door without knocking. He took one look at them. "You invited her as a joke." Lucan closed his eyes. "Marcel." Imogen laughed. This time, Lucan didn't mind being the punchline. 1 year later, the name on Imogen Reed's office door no longer said Executive Secretary. It read, Director of Executive Operations. The promotion had taken 4 months, 2 outside assessors, an independent compensation review, and a unanimous recommendation from a committee Lucan had deliberately excluded himself from. Imogen had earned it, which was why she was particularly annoyed when Lucan entered her office without an appointment. She looked over her glasses. "Do you need something, Mr. Serrano?" Lucan placed a reservation card on her desk. "Dinner." Imogen looked at the card, then at him. Is this another joke? His expression became completely serious. "I haven't made that mistake twice." She leaned back. Their relationship had survived 12 months of arguments, impossible schedules, security protocols, and Lucan learning that "I'll handle it" was not an acceptable response to every problem. Imogen had learned things too. She had learned that the feared Mafia Boss secretly read the mystery novels she left at his apartment, that he remembered everyone's coffee order now, that he still became irrational whenever Andrew visited, and that beneath Lucan's need for control was a man slowly discovering that love required something power never had: trust. "What's the occasion?" she asked. Lucan reached inside his jacket. Imogen's eyes narrowed. He produced a small black box. She stared at it. Lucan opened his mouth. "No." His eyebrows lifted. "You're not proposing before dinner." "Why?" "Because I haven't eaten." For perhaps the first time in criminal history, Lucan Serrano was defeated by blood sugar. He slowly returned the box to his jacket. "Dinner first." Imogen smiled. "You're learning." Very slowly. He offered his hand. She looked at it for a moment before taking it. The first time Lucan had invited Imogen to dinner, he'd assumed she would feel lucky simply because he had noticed her. He had been wrong about almost everything. She had never needed his attention to become beautiful, never needed his power to become important, never needed his approval to know her worth. The woman in the cardigan had always been the same woman in the black dress. Brilliant. Curvy. Bookish. Beautiful. Entirely herself. Lucan had simply needed to become a better man before he could see all of her. At the door, Imogen squeezed his hand. "Lucan?" "Yes?" "If the proposal is terrible, I'm saying no." He looked offended. "I planned it for 3 months. That doesn't answer my concern." A reluctant smile crossed his face. "Dinner first, Professor." Imogen stopped. Lucan immediately realized his mistake. Then she laughed and pulled him toward the elevator. "Come on, Mafia Boss." He followed. "That's why I'm still teaching you."